What if I told you one of the biggest movies ever made almost never got finished? That its director suffered a heart attack on set, that the Red Sea was made of jello, and that baby Moses wasn't an actor at all, but Charlton Heston's real-life son? This is the untold story of the Ten Commandments. 1956, a film so massive, so daring, and so cursed behind the scenes, it changed Hollywood forever. Here are 20 jaw-dropping facts you've probably never heard. Let's saddle up.
Number 20.
When Cecil B. DeMille set out to remake his own 1923 film, he didn't just want big, he wanted biblical big. The budget ballooned to $13 million. That's over $140 million today, making it the costliest movie Hollywood had ever seen. He built full-scale thousands of Egyptian temples, dressed with extras and handmade costumes, and even constructed an entire city of Ramesses in the desert. Studios thought he was insane, but the gamble made history.
Number 19.
When the Ten Commandments finally hit theaters, it wasn't just a movie premiere, it was a cultural earthquake. The film raked in an astonishing $65 million in its original release. That's over $700 million today. For context, that made it one of the highest-grossing films in history, a title it held for years. Families lined up around the block. Churches rented out entire theaters, and Paramount kept re-releasing it again and again for decades. And here's the wild part. Millions of people still watch it every year on TV during Easter. This movie didn't just dominate the box office, it became a tradition. Now, if a 1956 film can hold audiences for nearly 70 years straight, then this video deserves to hold your attention for at least a few more minutes, right? So do me a favor, tap that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on the bell. Because just like DeMille promised his audiences back then, I promise you, the best is yet to come.
Number 18.
This wasn't a normal shoot. It took 2 years to film, with massive desert scenes in Egypt and soundstage work in Hollywood. Crews battled sandstorms, blistering heat, and endless reshoots. Some effects, like the parting of the Red Sea, took 6 months alone to create. For the cast and crew, it wasn't just filmmaking. It felt like building a civilization.
Number 17.
Most people slow down by the time they reach their mid-70s. Not Cecil B. DeMille. At 75, he was the oldest active director in Hollywood, and instead of retiring, he chose to tackle the most ambitious project of his career. Every day on set, DeMille could be found in the Egyptian desert, wearing a full suit and tie, even in the blistering heat, barking orders through a megaphone to hundreds of extras. His determination was legendary. Crew members remembered him climbing steep dunes, standing for hours in the sun, and reviewing each take with meticulous precision. He wasn't just directing, he was commanding, almost like a general leading his troops into battle. But the toll was heavy. His obsession with perfection nearly cost him his life, leading to one of the most dramatic behind-the-scenes moments in film history.
Number 16.
During the grueling desert shoot, tragedy almost struck. While orchestrating a massive scene at Mount Sinai, DeMille suddenly collapsed. The diagnosis? A heart attack. At 75, in the middle of the Egyptian desert, most people would have retired immediately. Doctors begged him to rest. The studio panicked, fearing the entire production would collapse. But just 2 days later, DeMille returned to the set, weak but determined. Sitting in a chair with his megaphone, he continued directing one of the largest productions in history. The cast and crew were stunned. His return became a rallying cry, a symbol of unshakable dedication. If DeMille could push through a heart attack to finish this film, then so could they. In Hollywood lore, this moment has since become legendary. The image of an aging director refusing to let even death itself stop him from completing his masterpiece.
Number 15.
The most unforgettable scene in the Ten Commandments is, without question, the parting of the Red Sea. Audiences in 1956 sat in stunned silence, watching as a wall of water split apart to let Moses and his people cross. It looked miraculous, but the secret behind it? Surprisingly low-tech. Special effects wizard John P. Fulton used a mixture of giant water tanks, slow-motion cameras, and Jell-O. Yes, Jell-O, the gooey dessert. Here's how it worked. Fulton filmed 2 enormous tanks of water being released, then reversed the footage to create the illusion of water walls collapsing. But to capture the look of the water holding its shape before it came crashing down, he needed something thick, something that moved like liquid, but not too quickly. That's where Jell-O came in. He experimented with colored gelatin sheets and thickened water, layering it onto glass panels and using lighting tricks to make it shimmer like liquid. Combined with hand-painted matte backdrops and optical printing, it created one of the most jaw-dropping illusions of its time. The result was so convincing that even decades later, long after CGI became the norm, film historians still rank the Red Sea scene as one of the greatest special effects shots ever put on screen.
Number 14.
When you think of Moses, you probably hear the booming, commanding voice of Charlton Heston. His deep, resonant delivery gave the film much of its gravitas. But fun fact, Heston's voice was so powerful, the sound engineers had trouble recording it. During rehearsals, his voice would peak the microphones, distorting the audio. Engineers had to adjust the sound levels every time he raised his tone, especially in the famous "Let my people go" line. But here's the kicker. Heston didn't just sound like a biblical prophet. He looked the part too. His rugged features, broad frame, and intense stare made him the perfect embodiment of Moses. Audiences even wrote to Paramount saying it felt like Heston was born to play the role, and Heston himself leaned into it. Years later, when asked about the role, he admitted, "Playing Moses didn't just change my career, it changed me."
Number 13.
One of the most touching behind-the-scenes details is that Moses' mother in the film, Yochebed, was played by none other than Charlton Heston's real-life wife, Lydia Clark. In one of the early scenes, she lovingly places the infant Moses into the basket and sets him afloat on the Nile. The baby in her arms? That wasn't just any baby actor. It was Charlton Heston's actual infant son, Fraser Heston. So when you watch that scene, you're not just seeing an actress playing a role. You're watching Heston's real wife and child on screen together. It gave the moment an extra layer of authenticity and emotional depth that audiences could feel, even if they didn't know the backstory. And little Fraser, he grew up to become a director himself, later working on Hollywood productions just like his father.
Number 12.
The role of Ramesses II went to the charismatic and powerful Yul Brynner, fresh off his Broadway success in The King and I. With his piercing gauze, bald head, and regal presence, Brynner became the perfect counterbalance to Heston's Moses. But here's a twist. Behind the scenes, Brynner was actually bullied by Heston. The two men couldn't have been more different. Heston was tall, broad-shouldered, and commanding. Brynner, though muscular and confident, was more compact and theatrical. On their first days together, Brynner reportedly worked out obsessively, determined not to look small next to Heston on camera. He even requested specific camera angles to emphasize his presence during their confrontations. The rivalry, whether real or just friendly competition, actually worked in the film's favor. Their tension on screen felt authentic, two larger-than-life figures clashing in a battle of wills and destiny. To this day, their performances are considered some of the most iconic hero-villain portrayals in cinema history.
Number 11.
One of the most jaw-dropping sequences is the Exodus from Egypt, when Moses leads the Hebrews to freedom. For most films, this would have been handled with clever editing, small groups of actors, and maybe a few matte paintings. But not for DeMille. He wanted scale, real, physical scale. So he gathered over 8,000 extras, men, women, and children, to march across the desert. Add to that more than 15,000 animals, including camels, donkeys, horses, sheep, and oxen, and you had one of the largest live-action scenes ever filmed. The logistics were insane. Extras had to be organized in massive formations, fed, given water, and directed in the searing desert heat. Animal wranglers worked around the clock to prevent chaos. And DeMille? He stood high on a platform with his megaphone, commanding the scene like a biblical general. The final shot is breathtaking. A seemingly endless stream of humanity stretching across the sands, heading toward freedom. No CGI, no digital tricks, just pure manpower and ambition. That one scene alone helps cement the Ten Commandments as a true cinematic epic.
Number 10.
If Charlton Heston was the voice of power and Yul Brynner was the face of intimidation, then Anne Baxter brought the fire of passion to the Ten Commandments. Baxter played Nefertiti, the queen torn between her love for Moses and her loyalty to Pharaoh. But here's the thing. audiences and critics alike couldn't help but notice just how theatrical her performance was. Her lines were delivered with almost Shakespearean intensity, her eyes wide, her voice quivering, her emotions blazing across the screen. At times, she seemed less like an Egyptian queen and more like a soap opera diva transported into a biblical epic. And yet, that's exactly what DeMille wanted. He didn't want subtlety. He wanted grandeur. He wanted every whisper, every glare, every cry of anguish to hit the audience in the back row of the theater. Over the years, Baxter's performance has become something of a cult favorite, with fans both admiring and chuckling at her melodramatic delivery. But one thing is undeniable. She made Nefertiti unforgettable.
Number 9.
We've already talked about DeMille's heart attack in the desert, but here's the kicker. Parts of it are practically immortalized in the movie itself. When DeMille collapsed during the grueling Mount Sinai shoot, he insisted filming continue after his brief recovery. The scene that nearly killed him? The massive moment where Moses ascends to receive the 10 Commandments. So when you watch those sweeping shots of Moses climbing the mountain, know this: the man orchestrating the camera angles, shouting instructions, and demanding perfection was literally working through crippling chest pain. It's almost poetic. DeMille directing his own cinematic Mount Sinai, pushing his body to the brink, just as Moses pushed the Israelites toward their promised land. And when the film finally wrapped, cast and crew agreed. The movie wasn't just DeMille's masterpiece, it was his final will.
Number 8.
What most audiences never realized is that the 10 Commandments came dangerously close to collapse. Between the ballooning budget, DeMille's health scare, and the sheer logistical nightmare of coordinating thousands of people and animals, Paramount executives nearly pulled the plug multiple times. At one point, they even considered cutting the production down drastically, shortening the script, eliminating costly sets, and scrapping entire sequences. But DeMille refused. He told the studio, either we do this right, or we don't do it at all. His iron will go out. And ironically, the very risks that terrified Paramount became the movie's greatest strengths. Instead of being a flop, it became the film that saved the studio and defined DeMille's legacy.
Number 7.
One of the most iconic images in the film is Moses holding the stone tablets inscribed with the 10 Commandments. Most people assume they were lightweight props made of wood or plaster. Nope. DeMille went for authenticity. The tablets were carved from real stone slabs, and they were heavy, reportedly weighing over 50 pounds each. Charlton Heston had to lift them repeatedly during filming, often under hot stage lights while delivering dramatic speeches. Crew members joke that Heston got his prophet's physique not from gym workouts, but from lugging around DeMille's stone tablets. The effect, of course, was worth it. The sheer weight gave Heston's movements a natural gravity, making Moses look as though he were truly bearing the weight of divine law.
Number 6.
Here's one of the strangest and most whispered about facts of the entire production. To make the film feel authentic, DeMille insisted on basing the set designs on real Egyptian artifacts. But some of those artifacts weren't just replicas. They were rumored to be actual antiquities smuggled from Egypt. According to behind-the-scenes accounts, a handful of props used on set, such as jewelry, statues, and ceremonial items, were believed to have come directly from Egyptian tombs and markets. Some were supposedly borrowed from local dig sites and never returned. This sparked rumors of a curse. Crew members claimed to have seen strange shadows during night shoots, sudden accidents, and unexplained illnesses. While nothing was ever proven, whispers about the film being touched by ancient spirits followed it for decades. Whether fact or myth, it added an eerie layer to a production already steeped in history and legend.
Number 5.
One of the film's most mystical moments is when Moses encounters the burning bush. In the Bible, it burns with fire, but is never consumed. On screen, it had to look otherworldly, yet believable, something that would awe audiences in 1956. The solution? A combination of practical effects and clever trick photography. The prop department created a bush made of metal and flame-proof materials, then used hidden gas pipes to produce controlled fire. To give it the illusion of burning without being destroyed, the flames were carefully adjusted so they danced just above the leaves. But the real magic came in post-production. Technicians used optical printing and layered film exposures to make the flames glow in unnatural hues, almost as if they were alive. Audiences were stunned. Even now, the burning bush remains one of the most hauntingly beautiful special effects of classic Hollywood. 4. With all its grandeur, you'd expect the Ten Commandments to have swept the Academy Awards. Surprisingly, it didn't. The film was nominated for 7 Oscars, including Best Picture, Best Color Cinematography, and Best Art Direction. But it only took home 1 award, for Best Visual Effects. And honestly, it was well-deserved. The parting of the Red Sea, the burning bush, the golden calf sequence, all of them were groundbreaking at the time. Still, fans and critics alike were shocked it didn't win more. Many believe DeMille's age, reputation, and old-school style worked against him in an era where Hollywood was shifting toward new artistic movements. But in the end, awards didn't matter. Audiences crowned it a masterpiece, and its box office glory spoke louder than any golden statue.
Number 3.
Remember the heartwarming opening scenes with baby Moses floating in the basket on the Nile? That wasn't just any baby actor. As I mentioned earlier, it was actually Charlton Heston's real-life son, Fraser Heston. What's even more incredible is that Fraser's casting was unplanned. Originally, Paramount was set to hire a baby actor, but insurance restrictions, scheduling issues, and the unpredictability of working with infants made it difficult. So DeMille turned to Heston and said, "Why not use your own child?" Heston agreed, and suddenly the role of infant Moses went to Fraser, who was just a few months old at the time. Years later, Fraser would joke that his Hollywood career began at the very top of Mount Sinai, and there was nowhere to go but down.
Number 2.
Here's a fun fact with a modern twist. The Ten Commandments was essentially the YouTube clickbait of its day. DeMille himself appears in the opening of the film, stepping onto a stage curtain and addressing the audience directly. He explains the story, its importance, and why it matters. It was his way of saying, "Don't go anywhere, this is going to be worth your time."
Number 1.
And finally, the number 1 fact. The Ten Commandments was Cecil B. DeMille's last film. After decades of dominating Hollywood with epics like Samson and Delilah and The Greatest Show on Earth, DeMille poured every ounce of his experience, creativity, and ambition into this project. When it premiered, he stood proudly before the audience, frail but triumphant, knowing this would be his legacy. He passed away just a few years later, in 1959. But his final film lived on. To this day, The Ten Commandments is shown every year on television during Easter weekend, drawing millions of viewers. It's not just a movie anymore, it's a tradition, a cultural monument carved into cinematic history.
Bonus.
Most people know Cecil B. DeMille's 1956 The Ten Commandments as the ultimate biblical epic, but what they don't realize is that this was actually the second time DeMille told this story. Over 30 years earlier, in 1923, he made a silent film version of The Ten Commandments. Now, here's the twist. The 1923 film wasn't just the story of Moses. In fact, Moses only took up the first act. The rest of the movie was set in modern times, telling the cautionary tale of 2 brothers, one who followed the commandments and one who broke them. It was part biblical drama, part morality tale, part modern-day warning. And to bring ancient Egypt to life, DeMille built massive sets in the California desert, towering temples, colossal statues, and enormous gates. They were so huge that people called it the City of Pharaoh. But when filming wrapped, DeMille faced a problem. What do you do with an entire city made of plaster and wood in the middle of the desert? His solution was shocking. He buried it. He literally ordered bulldozers to cover the entire set under sand dunes so no other filmmaker could reuse it cheaply. For decades, the so-called Lost City of DeMille was hidden beneath the California desert, like a real-life archaeological site. Fast forward to the 1980s. Archaeologists and film historians began to dig in the dunes near Guadalupe, California. What they found was incredible. Giant plaster sphinxes, fragments of temple walls, and even painted hieroglyphics. Slowly, they unearthed the remains of a forgotten cinematic wonder. Today, pieces of that 1923 set are preserved in museums and archives, a reminder of Hollywood's earliest obsession with scale and spectacle. So when DeMille returned to the story in 1956, he wasn't just remaking his old movie. He was outdoing his younger self. He wanted to build something even bigger, louder, and more unforgettable. The buried city in California was like a ghost haunting him, pushing him to create a version of the Ten Commandments that could never be forgotten again. In the end, DeMille made not one but two monumental films, one lost to time and buried in sand, and another that continues to live on every Easter on screens around the world. So there you have it, 20 jaw-dropping facts about the Ten Commandments. From smuggled artifacts and real stone tablets, to Red Seas made of jello and directors pushing through heart attacks, this film is more than a movie. It's a miracle of persistence, creativity, and sheer ambition. Next time you watch it, remember, every scene you see on screen was backed by an army of artists, technicians, and visionaries who refused to let anything, budget, weather, or even death itself, stand in their way. And if these behind-the-scenes secrets made you see this classic in a whole new light, do what DeMille would have wanted. Like this video, subscribe for more movie deep dives, and share it with someone who still believes in the magic of old Hollywood. Because just like Moses on Mount Sinai, the greatest stories are the ones we pass down from generation to generation.